Hello everyone, welcome to this seminar on greening your China supply chain. Our guest today will share how sustainable factories and products are developing in China and what this means for international importers seeking to green their supply chain or profit from clean products. So it's my pleasure to introduce today Dr. Gong, lecturer in operations management, the director of CORMSIS Business Liaison for China at Southampton Business School. Also, we have the IPE Green Supply Chain Project Director, Ms. Ling Shenzhen, otherwise known as Helen. And also, we have Ms. Ling, the Chair of the APEC Cooperation Network on Green Supply Chain Tianjin Pilot Center. I'm also very happy to have Mr. Ben Orinstein, Chairman and CEO of Pvinergy Technologies, which operates a factory in Shenzhen and exports a range of innovative solar products to different countries. So we'll share the speaker profiles also in the description below the video, and you can contact them if you'd like to learn more information. So let us begin with Dr. Yu, who will outline the state of sustainable supply chains and innovation in China, as well as how importers can benefit from China's green industrial zones. So, Dr. Yu, let me ask you, first of all, are you generally seeing Chinese suppliers react to pressure from overseas buyers in terms of compliance? And or to what extent is there a proactive drive towards compliance and innovation in China?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to take part in this seminar, and thanks very much for Chris' invitation. Regarding the question, yes, we can see that actually the previous motivation for the majority of Chinese suppliers or companies, I believe that come from the international standards or the requirements from the companies in Western countries. And I believe that was the previous major drivers. Because for Chinese, especially in the exporting business, they have to meet the client's requirements. So that is the major driver. But of course, nowadays, we can also see that there were quite a lot of pressures from Chinese government. And there were lots of requirements, regulations, and checks, monitors on those Chinese suppliers. So altogether, this kind of external stakeholders put a higher pressure on Chinese suppliers. You're muted.
And as China strives to achieve global leadership in this area, such as solar, wind, and e-mobility, but to what extent now are these Chinese eco-friendly factories world-class?
Well, I believe that still depends on different sectors, so different industries. Some of the industries, if they are leading by, well, the major buyers are Western country companies, I believe they still play a major part in this process. Well, as you mentioned, there are also a few industries, maybe Chinese companies, they play a major part. So I believe they kind of be more proactive to respond to those green and sustainable pressures. And they're also trying to develop or innovate green products to meet the international needs. There were also quite a lot of good examples of Chinese firms like Ling, which is a solar panel company. I believe it is one of the first Chinese company join the WWF Climate Savers Program. So, which also shows that Chinese companies, they're also trying to play a part in the process. Well, again, another major reason for the company to join the program is because its major clients are Western clients. Yeah. But we can also say that like other industries such as electronic vehicles, again, I believe there's a macro strategy from the Chinese government perspective, and also they attracted like Tesla this kind of companies. So they're trying to innovate the whole EV supply chain.
You know, in terms of which one would you say is more important, like a green factory or a green product? So can the vertical supply chain initiatives, you know, as championed by European countries, be, you know, to what extent can they be integrated with these, perhaps some horizontal policy frameworks for land use, for example, as advanced like by China?
Yeah. I don't see there's a conflict between the vertical or horizontal integration, and there's not too much conflict between the green products or green manufacturing. So in our subject, so we carry out research on green supply chain or sustainable supply chain. And there are lots of initiatives, organizations they can carry out. So in terms of their products, their processes, and also in terms of the sustainable supply chain, they can pay attention to environmental issues like carbon, like energy, water, and they can also pay attention to social issues, so working conditions, maybe healthcare. All its initiatives are under the umbrella of green or sustainable supply chain. And as I already mentioned, previously, I believe it is more driven by the maybe vertical part, because driven by the Western countries, their standards. And nowadays, I can also see that there are loads of requirements from the Chinese government or the industry association perspective. So again, the horizontal perspective. I believe this kind of both dimensions, they kind of push the green and sustainable supply chain of Chinese manufacturing. Well, both are beneficial, and I also want to emphasize that the Chinese government is also serious on this matter. So for example, I also use a case study in my class. There was I believe it's a German company named Schaeffler, which supply parts to major automotive brands. Well, the Chinese government sent the penalty or notice to them that they need to pay attention to their environmental issues for about maybe 6 or 9 months, but the company didn't take any actions. And then the government suddenly shut down the factory. Well, and then the brands realized the factory actually supply critical parts to major automotive brands globally. So which means the shutdown of the factory can influence the whole supply chain for a very long time. And then it's quite interesting that the CEO sent a letter to the Chinese government and mentioned that you shouldn't take this kind of action. But of course, from this case, we know that Chinese government is really serious on this issue. And actually, there are plenty of time for the factory to take actions to address the issue. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Yu. And in a similar kind of topic, there are these new initiatives creating some market-oriented green innovation systems and green champions in like industrial parks, such as the circular economy pilot cities and green industry demonstration bases. How do you think how do you think these international buyers can benefit from these sourcing from these industrial clusters? Is there any benefits for them?
Well, yeah, of course. I believe there are positive benefits to the whole industry and globally. Well, I believe Ben maybe can give us some more examples from his industry. So in terms of, for example, polo panels, well, there were strict requirements in Western world. So for Chinese companies, if they supply solar panels to Western world, they have to be able to recycle those panels after certain years of operation. So for example, 20 years, 30 years, they have to have the recycling network, and which is actually, I believe, which is in parallel with Chinese initiative on circular industry parks. This is also a trend in our research. So previously, we focused on green supply chain, and in the last maybe 1 decade, we focus on sustainable supply chain. And nowadays, we kind of shift to circular supply chain. So whether the companies be able to be circular, so to reuse, remanufacturing, recycle their end-of-life products, and that has also become a competitive advantage for companies.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Chu. And probably the last question for now, I just wanted to talk about SMEs, perhaps these smaller than the brands, big brands. You know, what incentives are you seeing for them to source from highly compliant factories in China? Is there an incentive for them to consider the sustainability of the factory at the moment?
And this is also a very good question. Well, sometimes we may think that SMEs, they lack of resources, lack of expertise to work on sustainable initiatives. However, I would like to emphasize that this is also critical and important for SMEs if they would like to achieve long-term success or to be sustainable in the future. The reason for that is because for sustainable supply chain management, very often consumers will kind of assume that the focal companies, so the major players in the supply chain, they should take part their responsibility to be sustainable. However, from the supply chain perspective, we can see that normally, although the small and medium suppliers and maybe the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or even lower tier suppliers, they may hide behind those giant companies. However, once consumers, for example, take actions with the big brands, actually the brands will then back up to their suppliers to find out the root cause. And this is what we call multi-tier sustainable supply chain management, or sometimes we call multiple tier sustainable supply chain management. And it's always actually maybe the lower tier suppliers, their issues, their quality or their carbon emission issues, which cause the focal companies reputation lose. And we call it chain liability. So which means the focal companies, they may blame by the public. However, they may find out the root cause from their lower tier suppliers. So in this case, focal companies, they may prefer to collaborate with suppliers which they can demonstrate their sustainable capabilities. So again, this means for SMEs, if they would like to achieve long-term success, they have to have the sustainable capability in order to collaborate and enable to join the global supply chain network.
Dr. Yu, I really appreciate those insights. You've led me perfectly on to ask Helen from the IPE about this topic, actually, because I know this is the kind of work that the IPE are doing, looking as one of the projects that they do is looking at the suppliers of the factories as well, upstream and downstream, and so but usually with the big brands as well, but they of course work with SMEs. So please let me introduce now Helen from the IPE, who will introduce some of IPE's tools to monitor the factory and environmental compliance, and also consider whether the SMEs should pay attention to sustainability. The Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs is a non-profit environmental research organization which collates and analyzes environmental data to achieve environmental transformation. So yeah, welcome, Helen, and you have your slide there ready to go.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So you're able to see the screen, right?
Yeah, we can see it well. Looks nice.
Okay, sure. So thank you, first of all, for inviting us. And just like Chris said, I think we actually use the same case that Professor mentioned. So it's really interesting that we followed that, and it's just a smooth carry on. So like you interested to say very briefly, so we are an environmental NGO registered in China back in 2006. And since that time, one thing that we have been doing throughout this year is promoting environmental information disclosure. And the reason we do that is because we feel like environmental information will be able to enable different multi-stakeholders to join in the pollution control. And so once we have this environmental information, what do we make use of it? One thing we have been doing since 2011, 2013 is this idea of green supply chain. So after these days, as you can see on the screen, big brands like Apple, Dell, but also like local brands like Huawei and Langshu, which is a real property developer here in China, have all been using our database to into their supply chain management. So exactly how they do it, I've decided to use the quote from brands, which I think actually express more than me telling what actually the brands are doing. So for example, Microsoft, they clearly indicate that every month their team is using our database to screen their suppliers against environmental compliance records, which are issued by the Chinese government. So they use our database to identify which of their suppliers is not in compliance with environmental laws and regulations here in China. And brands like Puma indicate that they do similarly. They do the screening, and once they identify which of their suppliers have problems, they ask their supplier to communicate to us and provide follow-up actions, which means the suppliers, we actually guide the suppliers to do public explanation in terms of why the violation happens, what kind of corrective action they have taken, and what is their environmental compliance status now. So their brand customers know that they have been taking action regarding their incompliance, and now they are in compliance with local regulations. And so this is what brands have been doing throughout these years. And lately, what a lot of brands like Cisco have been doing is instead of or in parallel to brands managing their suppliers, they're actually talking to suppliers to say, look, you yourself can make use of IPE's database and tools to manage your own supply chain performance as well as your own performance. Because in China here, the government, the message that the government gives out is suppliers and facilities, you are the primary person in charge of your own pollution control and environmental protection. So instead of brands policing or sort of kept requiring and motivating suppliers to do such and such, our tools enable suppliers to look over their own performance, but also making the tools look into their own supply chain, which would be the upstream supply chain for brands. So to sum up, brands have been using our database to focus on environmental violation, which are cases that are not in compliance with environmental laws and regulations in China. Most of them focus on recent ones that means dating from 2018, and those that they identify as higher risk. So for example, polluting the water or over emissions in their exhaust air. Most of the brands would encourage suppliers to take corrective action once they identify there is a incompliance and violations, and they would ask suppliers to take issue a public explanations, as you can see here on the screen. So Toyota asked this particular supplier to issue an explanation regarding their violation records, and some of the brands using our tools decided to remain anonymous. So you will see like brand would ask their supplier to conduct such and such as well. Very last point is, so we also offer a GCA environmental audit where in which like suppliers can take the audit to demonstrate effectiveness of their rectifications. So these are some of the cases of suppliers taking action. They will write up their own explanations. So in a way, improving sort of their environmental credit in the eye of their customers. So making like a closed loop, so finding the violations and then closing the cases by demonstrating the effectiveness of their rectification. So the second, that's like the first part. And the second part I would like to share today is overall, like IP as a environmental NGO watching over like environmental issues in China for almost like 15 years. For us, we feel like there is a strengthened law enforcement and increased transparency in general in China. As you can see on this graph, this actually shows the number of violation records collected into our database by year. So you can see that back in 2006, when we were first established, it's a very small number. It's actually just over 1,000 for that particular year. But 2020, last year, we would receive like tens of hundreds of violation records coming into our database every year. So this shows like the law enforcement in China is strengthened, as well as the transparency. So actually, according to laws and regulations here in China, when the environmental protection bureaus go out to enforce laws and do the testing and monitoring, if they find a violation, they need to issue it publicly on their website within 20 days. So that's why we are able to collect a lot of violations. This shows like sort of, we also have a index that looks into how pollution information transparency has been across the nations, and we have been, as an NGO, sort of pushing the government to issue more violation records to the public. So nowadays, we're able to track like more than 5,000 official sources that issues violation records. This means, for example, Made in China would be treated as a sources for brands and suppliers to look into like how they can get this like cooperation in business. But for us, sources of environmental violation records are for us to be tracked. So we're able to track like 5,000 sources / like data points that actually issue different kinds of violations that in the end will be collected into our database. So I would say like because of this information disclosure from the government being improved, because the fact that brands are making use of this data and multi-stakeholders are making full use of environmental transparency, we do see that there is a trend of reduction of pollutions. I think everybody knows that China sort of is known for pollution, but now we're able to make use of this data that we collected since 2014 regarding like air quality, especially like PM 2.5, to make this like visualized data to show how like the pollutions are reduced throughout this year. So you can see that now in Beijing throughout in 2019, overall like the pollution issues is so much more better than back in 2014 when the color is much darker. So first of all, like this data are so much that we're able to make use of a data to do this visualized form. But on the other hand, as well, like environmental information enables different stakeholders to participate in pollution control. So we see a reduction of pollution as well. Lastly, so this comes to where we also call Schaeffler, which is one of the major like auto part producers worldwide. And I actually made changes for this slides right after the professor mentioned this case, because yes, back in 2016, the case of Schaeffler definitely highlights the importance of looking over the supply chain operational risk. But it was actually from last year that Schaeffler come to us and they start to make use of our database to identify which of their suppliers in China have violation records. So as you can see on the right-hand side, this is really recent as June, it actually comes from like June the 16th and June the 15th. So it's just very recently, and actually throughout this time, they have been using our database to track their suppliers' performance and identify which of them are in violations of local regulations and rules. And because that is the foundation of supply chain being green, right? You have to be, first of all, in compliance and talking about like reducing your carbon and improving your performance. The second thing why it's important to sort of for SMEs to start looking into the supply chain issue is not just because there's a risk, but also like stakeholders such as banks now in China are looking into your performance yourself and also your supply chain. So they make use of our database as well, but they make use of other databases as well to track how the performance of a facility is before they give out loans. So it's so important for you to be in compliance in order not just to have more orders from your brand customer, but also to get loans from the banks and being attracted to your investors. And the last point is, nowadays it's so easy to conduct green supply chain management because we have more data, environmental data, and big data even, and there's so much internet-based tools that allows facilities and small and medium-sized enterprises, but also like brands who source from China, to look over their supply chain performance in China. What I've shown is the tools that we develop, but there's also other tools out in the market as well, who allows like brands and suppliers to keep track of their environmental performance. So very lastly, I will end the presentation by giving like a case of how the supplier has been changed. This is actually an investigation we did back in 2018, which is a suspected supplier of Xiaomi, who before Xiaomi went on IPO in Hong Kong stock market, we actually did a complete investigation of their suspected supply chain in China. And one of them, which is a Taiwan-based company who produce in Suzhou in Jiangsu province, where we found them to actually discharge illegally their wastewater into a local river, and we report it, and the government sort of confirm it, and then it's not really Xiaomi, but the other brand customer of this particular factory drive them to take immediate actions, and this particular factory actually invest more than 2.2 million RMB on soil remediation. So I think this case shows that how like working together with brands, with customers and the supplier itself, we're able to like control the pollution issues in China, but also really greening the supply chain in China. So that's all that I would like to share today. Feel free to contact IPE if you want to learn more. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Helen. Actually, yeah, just have one or two quick questions. You managed to squeeze a lot into that presentation in a short time and show the pressures from inside and outside of China as well. But I just wanted to, because you work with a lot of brands, what is the generally an acceptable level of like compliance standards that brands are accepting? So how many of these regulatory violations are deemed like permissible, I mean, by these brands?
Yeah, it actually really varies from brands to brands. Some of them really clearly written down in their supplier code of conduct that their supplier needs to have no violation records on our database. So if there is a violation record, they need to remediate it, and they need to conduct like GCA audit to remove it. So that's for some brands. Some other brands think that, well, it could be like dating back from ages ago and suppliers must have taken corrective actions. So they would require like, okay, it's fine for you to have violation record, but you need to give a public explanation explaining why you had this violation and what kind of corrective action you have taken to remediate it. So it really varies from brand to brand. But I would say like most of the brands who use our database make it easy. So it's either you have violation or don't have violation. So it would be like an absolute zero that they would like to see.
That's quite strong compliance standards. And could you just mention a bit about your blue eco chain data? Is this the tool that you are mostly engaging with international brands and buyers?
Yeah, it is one of the tools that actually enables different stakeholders to keep track of the performance of facilities. So first of all, it is based on our database. So once a facility, or let's say I am Apple and I am following 100 suppliers in my account by the Blue Eco Chain tool, if one of them have new violation record, I will be able to get a notification alert notifying me that one of my suppliers have violation records. So it's actually very easy to use, and you don't need to keep track of 100. You just need to put them in a tool, and let the tool sort of do the screening every day and give you notify. So it's a little bit like Twitter or LinkedIn. Once the one that you follow has a new message, you get alerted and you can choose to see it or not.
Thanks. I'm sure the buyers will be interested in this product, in the software. And so thanks for that, Helen. That takes me actually nicely onto Ling. Ling is the chair of the APEC Cooperation Network on Green Supply Chain in Tianjin Pilot Center, and we will discuss attempts to unify green supply chain standards across borders, as well as areas of cooperation that are needed. So welcome, Ling. Please unmute your microphone, and we can get going. Mu, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, you're there. Okay, good. And welcome. You don't have a presentation, do you?
No.
No, okay, so we'll get straight into the questions. Actually, following on from what Helen said, how would you assess the unity of these green supply chain standards and management tools in China? Because there'll be quite a lot of different standards even inside China.
Okay, it's a very good question. Actually, there are not too many GSA standards in China, strictly speaking. GSA achieved dramatic development during the last couple of years. Ministry of Industry and Information is the government agent in charge of GSA, and standard on GSA for manufacturing industry is the only national level standard ever issued under the leadership of MII. Various guidelines on GSA were issued by MII as well. Sorry. Of which the framework and the basic principles are quite integrated. At city level, Tianjin City issued a series of local standards on GSA, which were the first bunch of GSA standards issued by local government. Some national association and influential organizations issued community standards as well. There are three general observations of mine. Firstly, a large percentage of these standards pay much attention to green, but not to supply chain management, and treat each segment of the supply chain as isolated parts. Secondly, the evaluation and the involvement stimulation mechanism of green performance of suppliers, especially those SMEs alongside supply chain, is not a priority. Thirdly, there is a long way to go for the integration of GSA standards with the concurrent green standard system of China, because it's the development of GSA standards is still at the very early stage, I think.
Thank you, Ling. And so with these are different standards across countries and regions. Then, as you mentioned, how is your association, the APEC Cooperation Network on Green Supply Chain, working to integrate these green standards across borders, especially in APEC?
Actually, the practice of GSA get more and more common around Asia Pacific region, but they always don't call it GSA in different countries. Actually, no specific GSA standards in Asia Pacific is except China, but there are a lot of practice both on regulatory level and also market level. So firstly, we are devoted to promote connectivity and communication through a few ways. We were invited to attend Committee of Trade and Investment official meetings of APEC to share progresses of the network, and co-hosted each annual meeting of the APEC GSA network with the Ministry of Environment Protection since 2015. We launched and operate a bilingual website of the network, which is linked to the official website of APEC. We launched the APEC GSA Showcase Center since 2018 to collect and share showcases on green supply chain around this region. We also work very closely with our other members, such as GECA and Kitty of the network, to conduct research projects. One of which is on the feasibility study of green procurement for APEC. The research report was welcomed by the Leaders' Declaration of APEC in 2017. Recently, we are in the process of co-sponsor a seminar with Australia Committee on Trade and Investment to promote cross-border environment-related business cooperation and mutual recognition of GSA standards are one of the topics of the seminar. We believe, such as common law, we promote standard mutual recognition and integration through collection of showcases, and through these showcases and through all this discussion, and we can. All of us will you get more information and understanding from each other, and then in this way we can get more and more common common concept of GSA, and to promote the integration of GSA standards and the application.
Good. I wish you luck with Australia. I hope that you can. I know the relationship is not too good right now with Australia, so I hope you can continue the dialogue at the high level.
Yeah, both of us understand the situation, but no matter how serious the word is concurrent, we faced, but a business still is the most important driven force for the world to move forward. I hope we can, we can have it before the end of August. Thank you.
Oh, that's very soon. That's very soon.
We, if you and other friends are interested in, we can, maybe it's online and offline. Both are okay. So I will be more than happy to invite you if the agenda is fixed.
Sure. And what did you call? What's the name of this cooperation with Australia that you're seeking in August? A dialogue.
They invited some leading enterprises, such as they are good at water pollution treatment and other air pollution treatment, something like this, and also some leading third-party auditing organizations such as maybe SGS or I could not remember the name of their name, but I can send you later on. We are in the process of discussing the content of this seminar.
Great. I'm sure we'll be in contact about that. And maybe in a second, Dr. Yu could comment on the standards across the APEC as well. You may have something to say about that, the standards. But just before I ask Dr. Yu that and then go on to Ben, I just wanted to ask you the final question about how effective are the current regulatory and financial carrots so to speak, in China for the factories to green their production activities? Are they strong enough?
It's encouraging, but there is a lot of potential. The factories are very realistic, and some of them are very happy and very active to be involved. But many others, they are still waiting for more active, more value, more encouraging policies.
I see. Yeah, of course. So we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and another point is, no matter how generous these regulatory and financial carrots are, the effect will still be quite limited without extensive involvement of private sector, especially for those multinational corporation and big local companies. I mean,
thanks a lot.
It could not be sufficient by it alone.
Of course, yeah. And thank you, Ling. Just before I go to Ben, Dr. Yu, would you like to comment on any of these things you've heard from Helen and Ling? I'm sure you may have some thoughts on this. Dr. Yu?
Me too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's quite interesting to listen to Helen's presentation. And well, in academic, we also know that third party is also a very important governance mechanism for focal companies to manage their multiple tiers of supply chain. So for in order to better manage and monitor their longer upstream suppliers and via third party, for example, the IPE's database would be a very effective approach. Regarding to Ling's opinions, well, I also echo to her opinion that for SMEs, they may be very practical. So for multinational companies, if they would like really to address the sustainable supply chain issues, they have to bear the cost with their suppliers. And for those SMEs, they will not kind of donate their resources themselves. So they're always looking for the support. So either they share the cost with the MNCs or the MNCs pay for their expense. Or alternatively, once they meet the regulations, they can gain promise of more and longer term, more orders and longer term collaborations. So based on this kind of transactions, and then they are maybe more willing to make investment and to make changes. And this is also my research area. And I name it supply chain leadership. So for multinational companies, they can play the trick of carrot and stick, so which we call it transactional leadership. Alternatively, they can also play the role of transformational leadership, which means they kind of emphasize their vision and mission about the long-term future development. However, transformational leadership may not be enough. There will still need some transactional approach. So either to how they support the SMEs and how do they educate, how do they develop their suppliers is also very critical.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. And just quickly before I go to Ben, do you have anything to add, Helen, to this? Helen or Ling, would you like to add anything to Dr. Yu's comments?
Not from my side, thanks.
Sorry? You okay? Okay.
I would to add one more point is
sure.
Many people would like to do more things, but tools and mechanism are very critical, especially for 2021. Yeah, and afterward, tools and platform and mechanism functional.
Great. Then you'll have to talk to Helen about the tools and the platforms. She's the expert at that, and that's great. And so that was a heavy discussion on factories and supply chains. And now I'll bring in Ben to maybe lighten the mood with some green products. I'm not sure if your factory is green and sustainable, Ben, but you're definitely producing green products. And so please let me introduce Mr. Ben Orinstein to the show. And he's the chairman and CEO of Pvinergy Technologies, which operates a factory in Shenzhen and exports a range of innovative solar products. So Ben, you can please unmute yourself and you can join the conversation. Yeah, please unmute yourself, Ben, because I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Good, Ben. Yeah, I can hear you nice and well. Thanks for waiting, Ben. Sorry, but your topic is more on the products.
Yeah, so thank you again for inviting me, and I would like to share with you some of my ideas about misconception of solar, the usage, and the purpose. In general, I believe solar is at the very early stages of a long-term evolution of the way we get energy. And it has very little to do with cost saving. Right now, most people are under the opinion that solar is all about saving cost and money. I think that will be out the window in 2 years. Nobody will even think about cost. Just like our mobile phone, right? I don't know, 10 years ago, shall I use my mobile phone or I use my landline? We don't have landline. I don't have one, right? So to me, that makes it very exciting because I believe we are at the very early stages. And the solar energy and the energy supply is very closely tied to a lot of complementary technologies, whether it's electric cars, electric airplanes, electric trains, smart homes. Almost everything you touch has application with solar. So what I will do now, I will switch quickly to my presentation. Give me 1 second to put it on the screen, okay?
Yeah, sure.
I pushed the wrong
So
button.
Ben Orinstein has, I think, 20 years of experience in working in China doing business. So he's could be a role model to some of our international buyers and importers, especially now that he's moved to the green.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
Can you see it? Okay,
yeah, we can see it very well.
Perfect. So
over to you, Ben.
Okay. What you see here really, I will start with the basic. Okay, that's about me, not very important. For those of you who are not in the solar business, I will give you a crash course in solar technology. Solar system consists of 3 key components: the solar panel, the solar inverter converter, and a battery. The function of each is the following. The solar panel function is to convert solar energy into electric energy. Usually it's a DC energy, DC power. The DC power coming from the solar panel usually is not strong enough, not high enough to provide enough power. So it goes to a box, we call it an inverter, that converts the DC either to DC or to AC, but and much more power. And then with this power, we can charge a battery. Why do we need battery? The battery really acts as an energy storage component. And because we want to have energy also at night or in the winter when there is no sun. So those are the three components, and depends on the appliances. You can have either DC or DC and AC. But since today, most of the appliances are still AC, most of the boxes need to be converted to AC. Next application is solar water pumping system. Until not long time ago, if you were in the desert or in a remote area, to get water, either for irrigation or for drinking, was a nice dream, but very difficult to achieve. Today, what we say is, if you have sun, we can get you water. And this is on the display, again, the key components of solar water pumping system. You have the solar panel, you have a charger controller, you have a pump, and because in this application, the product is water, not energy, what we do, we collect the water, we collect the water and we pump the water during the day. When there is sun, we fill it up, we transfer it into a big water tank, and then the water tank is becoming again our water storage, which at this point, it becomes really not that much difference in every municipality around the world, where you have a big water tank on high area, whether it's a hill, a mountain, or just a high construction. And from that point, the water is being distributed, whether it's agriculture or drinking. These are some pictures showing what happened to area that, if you can imagine, all this green was maybe a year ago, a desert, like maybe you can see on the lower right side. So this application, if you think about it, the ROI, return on investment, and saving costs is really not important. It's either you have water or you don't have water. Cost is not a big issue here. The other part about solar, which makes it very exciting, is it's evolving, changing very rapidly. I think those numbers that we have here for market research, they will be blown out. And the understanding or evaluation of usage of solar as ROI, return on investment, how many years will take me to get my investment out, as I said, that will go out. I will quickly forget about this motherhood. I will go show you some more applications. Why I believe the solar is really in its infancy. This is another application, pretty much targeted at a low income, undeveloped infrastructure areas, mostly rural areas. I would say very common in Africa, Middle East, and other countries in Southeast Asia, maybe Indonesia, Malaysia, even Thailand, many other parts of the world where the income of the citizen is not sufficient even to afford those systems, which are relatively inexpensive, but it's still too expensive for these people. So this system basically works like our mobile phone. You pay as you go. That's what it's called. So again, this is application targeted for people who have really no other option. There's a few projects we did around the world that, again, I want to show you the application where really showing you the power of energy, how it's empowering low-income people and turning them from being a burden on the economy to becoming productive, self-sufficient, and very proud people. So this project is in Indonesia. Indonesia, I don't know which number you want to believe, but the number I was told is about 15,000 small islands spread all over the place. Most of them have a very low number of habitats, which means for this number of people, less than 1,000 people, they're almost doomed. They will never have power because it doesn't make economic sense to build a power station to supply power to less than 1,000 people. You'll never get your investment back. So the person you see in this picture, just for you to understand, the day before, he was sitting with a candle. There was no other energy. He had a little system, very happy. He had the TV working, a little solar, not solar, but a little stereo system. And wow, life is much, much better. And you can see the structure and the quality of the living. No need to have a big imagination to understand these people really don't have high quality and high standard of living. This is a different project, but pretty much similar in its concept. This one is in Africa, where the government sponsored 10,000 solar systems to its citizens. If you look at the picture on the right top corner, you can see again the quality of the housing. And again, you have to understand these people yesterday were sitting with a candle, maybe not even a candle. I don't know if they had a candle. This is in the middle of the jungle, but definitely no energy. And this is a small system the government provided, so it's sufficient enough to give them light, charging the mobile phone, and maybe a little fan. But again, it takes standard of living from night to day in 12 hours. Nothing else in the world can change life so quickly. This is another project, again, in Africa. And just for you to understand, the government sponsored a few thousand systems to citizens in different parts of Africa, of this country. And again, for you to try to understand, these people never had electricity. So our local partner has to collect them, in this case, collected them in the church, and has to give them a short briefing about what to do, what not to do when you have electric power. Because we learn from past experience, when you don't do it, they do some not very smart things. Not because they're not smart, but just have no idea. They don't have any concept of the power, what you can do, what you cannot do. So you can see people standing in line, everybody gets a system, and he goes home, and let's see what happens. I'm not sure if you can see it clear enough, but if you don't, you have to believe me. The picture on the top showing the whole village the night before everybody got the system. The village is dark. There is no light. The night after, 24 hours later, if you can see it, the whole village has power, lights. The homes have lights coming out the windows. I can tell you from my experience, there is nothing in the world, doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world, that can turn a whole village from light, from dark to light in 24 hours. Pretty much impossible. Again, application where there is no issue of ROI, return on investment, cost saving. Really, there's only one option. Either you have power or you don't have power. The other thing I want you to understand, when you empower the people, you turn them from being a burden to being self-sufficient. You really have a major social benefit here. That's my presentation. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Ben. We actually we've run out of time now. So, but all the audience members will be able to contact you and ask you any questions, especially about the maintenance of these solar panels. That would be an interesting question, especially in these isolated areas such as islands and stuff. The maintenance might be an interesting question. And just to say that Pvinergy is not a member of Made-in-China.com, and but you should be. We hope you can join us one day. But we thought, after discussing the sustainability of factories, it was good to see the other side, which is the products. And you know, so solar products can be considered green in many ways, you know. So I appreciate that, Ben. And we're going to have to wrap up today because it's gone up to an hour, and I'm really grateful for all your time. Today we discussed the current development of green industries and factories in China, as well as tools to assess the sustainability of factories and current green product standards and avenues for further cooperation. We also saw just now with Ben how solar can be used as a clean energy source in so many areas of business and in remote areas, and also the win-win features of solar energy, both in terms of society and business. So we wish you well, Ben, and you can join Made-in-China.com anytime. And and I'll say to end this, I'll say I hope we can learn. Hope Made-in-China.com can learn from the expertise of all our guest speakers today and really take this green initiative forward. And I think it's important for Made-in-China.com. So I'll conclude by saying thanks again to everyone for your insights, and we wish all our viewers a successful green sourcing journey. And thank you very much, everyone.